Portuguese and then start English after, okay?
Okay. Should I turn my screen share off?
No, not necessary. You can start.
Okay.
Let's check. We are on air. Let me check the people around us. 17 people. Ok, folks. Olá, pessoal. Sou o Zósimo. Estamos começando aqui mais um webinar da MundoPM, mais precisamente sobre Project Design Management. Para essa sessão do webinar, nós convidamos o professor Oscar Nespoli, da Universidade do Waterloo, do Canadá, para compartilhar conosco um pouco da experiência dele a respeito de práticas de design para engenharia, para inovação e como o design tem influenciado a educação como um todo. Espero que vocês gostem. Nós vamos ter um tempo aí relativo a perguntas no final, ok? E aí vocês têm a liberdade de, no chat, também perguntarem coisas, ok? So, Professor Oscar, I did a fast introduction about you, just regarding about that you are professional in Waterloo University, Canada, and director of the program about engineering and design practices, and also a chair SIG about design practices. So be my guest, and then you can talk with your webcam first, and then share your presentation for us. You are very welcome. Just go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zosimo, for that introduction. I apologize because I don't understand Portuguese, although I understand Italian. But it is very nice to be invited to speak to you today. And I want to thank Zosimo for inviting me. So now I will share my screen presentation. And the title of my presentation is Preparing Engineers to Tackle Complex Design Problems. And I want to start out with a quote. This is a quote by Donald Schoen, who was a professor of urban planning at MIT and the author of an important book in design called Educating Reflective Practitioners. And I like this quote: "Competent practitioners know more than they can tell." My father was a designer all his life, and he knew more than he could share with me. And expert designers also have that wisdom that is hard to express. And this is what practice is all about. I'd like to talk to you about some methods around a course that I use to try and develop good practitioners and problem solvers. But before I do that, I want to share with you a picture of me in 2007 before I came to Waterloo, when I was in industry for about 20 years. And this was the last job that I did. I was a program manager for a company near Toronto, which makes airborne camera systems. And many of you...
Excuse me, Professor Oscar. I'm not sure I can see your shared screen. Could you confirm to again the screen, because I just see the tunnel picture. Not okay. See you now.
Okay, do you see it now?
Yeah, there we go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Zosimo. As I was saying before I came to Waterloo, I was in industry for 20 years, and this is a picture of one of the last projects I did, which happened to be successful. Some of you will appreciate that there's a lot that goes on in successful projects that is due to sheer hard work and good practice. So for today's outline, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about the Design Society, where I have Zosimo as a colleague, and we're part of the design practice group. Then just very quickly, a little bit about University of Waterloo, and then talk a little bit about the Waterloo Graduate Diploma in Design, and talk a little bit about some techniques that I use to teach design. So the Design Society is an international non-profit making organizations whose members have a common interest in design. And the Design Society strives to contribute to understanding all aspects of design and to promote the use of these results and knowledge for the good of humanity. Special interest groups are groups that are formed for a temporary period of time to provide opportunities to focus on a certain area of research and interest, and they provide opportunities to network and to share on certain topics. In our design practice group, we aim to try and bring both practitioners and researchers together through the capture, the study, and the communication of very authentic problems in their contexts from all areas of engineering practice. And why is this important? Well, what I found is that you can see what a practitioner knows when they interact with a tough problem. You can't really see what they know until you get them to interact with a tough problem. And I think researchers and academics can learn from their interaction from these problems, and also practitioners can learn from the academics on methods that could be possible to use around these tough problems. So we want the problems to do the talking. But more specifically, we want to encourage practitioners to challenge researchers on what they need as far as tools go. We also want academics to understand design practice. We want to express the value of our design research to practitioners and to generally increase the awareness to industry and other sectors of availability of practical design methods and tools. I'm going to introduce two practical methods today that are very powerful that I teach. So essentially in our design practice group, our concerns are design practice and the researching of design practice. With respect to the University of Waterloo, we were founded in 1957, so we're very young, 60 years, as a cooperative engineering school. And it is our aim to become one of the most innovative universities in the world, which is a very tough ambition. And we would like to be at the forefront of that innovation. And part of that is building bridges with industry and between disciplines. The engineering school is the largest in Canada, and it's ranked among the top 50 in the world. We have more than $60 million in research funding in engineering, and it's one of the top technology schools. We happen to attract employers, mostly from the US, for our cooperative education students and our graduates as well. So as I've mentioned, all of the undergraduate programs at Waterloo in engineering are co-op programs. And what that means is that students alternate between 4-month academic terms and 4-month industry internships. And there are different sequences between these co-op internships and academic terms. This is the distinguishing feature of our programming. And it provides an opportunity for us to teach our students, not just during the academic terms, but possibly during the industrial internships. So we are a very young university. Yeah.
Excuse me, Oscar, again. You disable your video transmit your cam, because sometimes your audio is floating, and then
Okay.
you lost the better transmission audio.
Okay.
Just the icon. Yeah. Please. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Now it's perfect.
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
No, no problem. It's good. Perfect.
Okay. So now I didn't go to the University of Waterloo for my undergraduate program. I came here for graduate school, but my two sons went here, and as a parent, it's great because you see that they can pay their way through school. So it's very good. So that's really what I wanted to talk about our university. Now, with respect to talking about how I try to teach design, I want to start off by introducing you to a case study. So this is a real story, a real case study that I worked on. And it's about Lois Scott, who lives locally here. And she is a world-renowned artist. She is known for her beautifully cut glass artifacts. They're vases. She cuts them out of glass-blown vessels. She must hold these heavy glass vessels all day while she carves them because of the way she likes to carve them. And she gets tired doing that. But she also injured her shoulder in a car accident. And so she finds it difficult to do her work. So I want to introduce this situation by playing a video clip of her working in her workshop. This is Lois working in her workshop, and you can see that she's holding a glass vessel that can weigh, let's say, up to 10 kilograms. And she's holding it against a saw, which you may argue is not very safe. And she moves the vessel, which is close to her body, against the saw and carves these beautiful shapes. And that's the way she likes to work. So now I'm going to play the video of her working. So now the question I would ask you, and I would ask my students, is how would you approach this situation? What would you do to help Lois? It's one thing to solve problems in a classroom that are simple, but generally design problems are usually the most complex and ill-structured kind of problems encountered in practice. And how can you teach design when you address these kinds of difficult problems in a classroom? Well, using case studies is one way to do that. So in this case, we want to try and solve this problem using design. But we should ask ourselves the question, what is design? Because design means different things to different people. This is a very recent representation of what constitutes innovation, which I really like. And basically, it identifies 3 sub-processes: science, design, and entrepreneurship equal innovation. Science begins with a question and uses the method of inquiry to develop some kind of theory or discovery, whereas design begins with a need, and then design methods and skills are used to come up with an invention. And it's really important to distinguish between these 2 sub-processes. In the course that I teach, I'm focused on teaching the students the processes of design, need finding to invention, with the possibility of extending this to some commercialization activity. I find this very useful to define what design is. Another useful analogy, which I'd like to use to talk about research and design, is this idea of the innovation powertrain, which consists of an engine, a drive shaft, and wheels that transfer power into the road. And in this case, we could say that the engine represents research, which is the first to acquire new knowledge through leading edge research. The drive shaft is being first to apply or to transfer that knowledge to create sought after products and services through engineering. And the wheel is the first to introduce those products and services into the marketplace, into the road, into the need. And so what we can say is the engine really is a method of inquiry, and the drive shaft is really a method of creative activity. And that's quite different. In fact, if we think about it, they're different methodologies. They constitute different procedural knowledge. The scientific method consists of asking a question, doing background research, constructing a hypothesis, testing the hypothesis through experiment, analyzing the data and drawing conclusions, and then communicating the results through publications. The engineering method, on the other hand, involves creation and problem solving, and it starts with a need or a problem, formulating the problem through need analysis, synthesizing solutions by creating and designing, going through reformulation steps, verifying that your solution meets the need, and then communicating that through documents of commerce. And these are 2 different methodologies. We are concerned with the methodology on the right, which is a method of creative activity. So, in fact, we're concerned about the drive shaft, the method of creative activity, and teaching those skills. Now, the other thing that's really important to understand is that you can create knowledge about the creative activity. So, for example, we can have inquiry about domain knowledge, but we can also have inquiry about procedural knowledge. So, for example, we can develop and research new knowledge about solid mechanics, but we should also be able to research about design and designing. So using the process of inquiry to learn about new knowledge about design and designing. And in fact, this has occurred quite vigorously after about the year 2000. This is a study on publications from the year 1969 to almost the present, where 80% of the research literature base for design or design thinking date from after the year 2000. So there wasn't much research that was being published until that time. And in fact, when I went to engineering school, there wasn't very much research in design published at all. John Arnold, if you haven't heard of him, was a professor at MIT and Stanford. And you can see that he was teaching design, but there was not much research being done there. When I was working, I remember agreeing with our president that only 1 in 10 of our engineers could define a problem. And now it's clear to me that the reason for that is that they weren't being taught how to define a problem. And of course, this is very, very important. When we look at the research perspectives in this body of knowledge, they can be categorized into 5 different separate discourses. So when we think about design, we can think about it as the creation of artifacts. We can think about it as a problem-solving activity. We can think about it as reflective practice, as Donald Schoen indicates. We can think about it as a way of reasoning or making sense of a messy situation. Or we can think of it, as most architects do, as the creation of meaning. So creating a building that communicates meaning. And the one that we're concerned about in engineering primarily is the top 3, mostly creating artifacts and teaching problem-solving activities, methods, and strategies. And we can go further and look at David Jonason's paper Toward a Design Theory of Problem Solving, where he categorizes different problem types across the top, from logical problems, which are very algorithmic, to all the way to dilemmas, which are very intractable and very difficult problems to solve. And you can see in this taxonomy that he places design problems very near the top. They're very ill-structured, the contexts are very complicated, there are multiple degrees of freedom, there's really no right or wrong answer, only better or worse. And you can also see that case analysis problems approach design problems. And so this is why using cases is desirable in the classroom, because they try to approximate design practice. It's really important for our engineers to learn how to do complex problem solving. In the Future of Jobs report, that's one of the top 10 skills. It's the top 10 skills, according to the World Economic Forum. And creativity has jumped from number 10 to number 3. So we must prepare our engineers for this. When we look at the characteristic that defines a professional engineer, it is in fact the ability to work with complexity and uncertainty. And a good way to understand what we should be teaching our engineers from the point of view of design is to look at this spectrum of capabilities for design for engineers, technologists, and technicians. Technicians are required to design solutions for well-defined problems. That's how they should be taught. Technologists should be taught to design solutions for broadly defined problems. Engineers should be taught how to design solutions for complex engineering problems and systems. And in fact, world-class engineers should be able to address messy, indeterminate situations. And so the question is, how can you teach them this during an academic term when all of the problems are really out there in practice? Another quote by 2 cognitive scientists suggests that design is a quintessential cognitive task. It's a signature of human intelligence. It is at the top of the cognitive performance domain. And Herbert Simon distinguishes design as the principal mark that distinguishes the professions from the sciences. It should be the core of all professional training. We look at models and we can see that some are very simple prescriptions. This by Asimov, starting by analysis, moving to synthesis, then evaluation, and then of course reformulation. In 2005, the British Design Council introduced the so-called double diamond model for design. And I like this because it defines a problem space and a solution space. And this is very important for students to understand, is that these 2 spaces exist separate from one another. The Federal Drug Administration has specific guidance on the processes that medical device manufacturers must go through. And it must start with user needs, to design input, to the design process, to the design output, and then the medical device, with verification between the output and input, review meetings at each step, and then validation of the device with the user. And this is also very useful for our students to see. And then finally, I was given permission by John Clarkson at the University of Cambridge when I was in Vancouver recently to show this slide, which he presented at his keynote. And it's a more sophisticated representation of the design process. Starts off with current performance, where there's a trigger that's initiated for improvement, and starts with understanding the problem, designing a solution, delivering the solution, sustaining it through its life, and disposing of it to something that's measurably better. And throughout this process, you go through planning, you go through design, you go through people and collaboration activities, you manage risk, and you take a systems level view. So this is a very nice summary, the best probably prescription that I've come by so far. But fundamentally, the process of engineering design is problem finding and formulating and problem solving. And I use the term need analysis in my courses for problem formulation, and problem solving, of course, is design and then some kind of verification activity. And when I say design, I mean creating something. And to me, the acid test for a design task is when you're creating. That is not the most important part of the process, however. Need analysis is a critical part of engineering design. And how do we teach it? Even Plato said, necessity is the mother of invention. And Albert Einstein and Leopold Infield suggested that the mere formulation of a problem is far more essential than its solution. So the emphasis on really understanding the problem is the first step in teaching world-class engineers. And so this is my set of learning outcomes for the first course. And you can see that I emphasize the learning outcome of identifying, representing, and communicating a mechanical engineering problem or opportunity. And when I teach it, I spend 1 week on identification of the problem. I spend another week on representation of the problem, and I spend a third week on communication of the problem. When we say need analysis, we can think of it as defining the problem, and that results in a statement of need that's very accurate. And then representing the problem in an abstract way, in a solution-independent way, and to develop some representation that's useful for the problem. And then finally, there's the communication of the problem, which should end with some specification document that's very clear. And of course, there's reformulation. And this is not failure, this is a strategy of going through and really understanding the problem. I've identified quotes for each of these stages. Of course, this one by Plato, necessity is the mother of invention. Representing the problem, the mere formulation of a problem is far more essential than its solution. Communication is so important. And my favorite quote by George Bernard Shaw, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Reformulation, if at first you don't succeed, try again. And then finally, while you're scanning for those needs, a quote by Robert Hooke, there is not so much required any strength of imagination or exactness of method or depth of contemplation as a sincere hand, a faithful eye to examine and to record the things themselves as they appear. We should teach our students to look for needs. So what skills would you use now in order to begin to understand the real problem that Lois has, and how could you express it? Well, we can use discovery skills. And these discovery skills begin by having the courage and inspiration to innovate. So having this intrinsic motivation to make things better. Then there are the behavioral skills themselves, and then there is some cognitive synthesis to understand. The courage and inspiration to innovate begins by challenging the status quo and taking risks. Our students are not very good at that. We have to teach them that. Behavioral skills are very simple to list and very hard to do. When you're faced with a situation like Lois, you should ask her lots of questions. You should do passive observation and powerful observation. You should talk to her, and perhaps you should even experiment yourself. And then pulling these all together to associate the problem. So questioning means asking lots of good questions, penetrating questions. There are no dumb questions. Observing means going to see and going to the source. Networking, talking to people, and then experimenting. Living the need is what I teach my students. There's no better way to understand the problem than by living it. And designers do this. They live in practice. They have a feeling for their problem. And so that's the first thing you should do, is you should go and live and feel the problem. So identifying the real need, or the crux of the problem, is the single most important element of need analysis. It's similar to root cause analysis and quality. If you don't know it, then it's very difficult to solve and address the real issue. It represents the prime design requirement, and the way I teach it, the way I get the students to construct the need, is to construct it using the prime functional requirement and the prime constraint requirement. And this statement must be very, very concise, devoid of context. It should be 10 words or less, and it should not be a solution statement. So, for example, a need exists to primary function, primary constraint. If I were designing a gearbox, I might say a need exists to transfer torque efficiently. So a gearbox for an electric vehicle, for example. That is the real need for that gearbox. The primary function is to transfer torque or to modify power, and the primary constraint for an electric vehicle is to do it very efficiently. So we construct the need statement and the primary function using an active verb, transfer, and a measurable noun. And I challenge my students to do this, and it's something that's very, very difficult to do. This method was actually developed in the 1940s during World War II by Lawrence Miles, when he was trying to find a procured product that could be substituted. And what he did was he did an abstraction, and he used a verb-noun pair to do this. In fact, this spawned a discipline called value engineering, which many of you may use and know of. So where do you get the context? Well, the real need must be placed in the context of the design opportunity. And this is the way I teach it, is the context is a photograph, and the real need is a white box, which is a nice way to abstract from the context. And so, for example, in Lois's case, the real need is located where she has to have some help to support this vessel that's very heavy. And so you ask yourself, what is the primary function that a new design must perform? And to use a verb and a noun pair only, and get the right verb and the right noun to be very accurate. If you don't know the real need, then you don't know the problem you're trying to solve. Another method is the use of what's called a 9-screen vision. So instead of looking at the problem at one level, think of it at the system level and in the past, in the present, and in the future. And this is a technique that was introduced by Bookman in his book, Triz Technology for Innovation. And I find it to be very, very powerful in teaching our students. Students generally take a depth-first approach when they solve problems. whereas experts take a breadth-first approach. So they step back from the problem and they try to see the big picture. And this is a useful tool to teach students, to get them to see the big picture. So for example, the present at the system level would also lead to super system and subsystem level. And what TRIZ technology tells us is that technical system evolved to their ideal state. So if you can express the past and the present, it may give you a clue to the future. So perhaps an example of this might be the Tesla car, which is the existing system. In the past, we had a horse and chariot, and that had a wheel, a wooden wheel. And we had the Roman roads, of course, which were very durable. And in the present, we have our highways, and in the future, we'll have some super highways. And of course, then in the present, we have a very sophisticated wheel and tire assembly. And one wonders, what kind of design will that tire evolve to? And so we define our problem space for some new design at the subsystem level and the future. And we imagine what the need would be there. But however, if the system level evolves to something like this, which some of you will recognize as the Jetsons family, then do you really need a design at the subsystem level? So this framing is the result of a more sophisticated view of the problem and the approach. And it's important to teach students this, to frame the problem in an appropriate way. So now I ask you, what is the real need for a future design? And can you express it in a verb and a noun pair? When I asked my students to do this, 39% of them saw the problem at the subsystem level. 23% of them saw the problem at the system level. 8% of them saw the problem at both the system and the subsystem level. And when I showed them the video and had them do the case study, a third of the students did not articulate a need at all. And this is a problem, because if you don't know the need, then what problem are you solving? So I'm trying to say that the case study method is a useful way to teach 9-screen vision and the real need in a classroom. So the real need, in fact, is to negate the weight of the vase while maintaining the human-machine interface. And what does that mean? Well, as mechanical engineers, we may say to her, well, why don't you use a grinder and hold the vessel between centers like a lathe? But that ignores her preferred way of working as an artist. She wants to hold the vessel, and so we must respect that. And so that's a very important constraint on any future design. And these are apparently in conflict. You could argue there's a technical contradiction between negating the weight and maintaining her way of holding things. So the need statement is, a need exists to negate the weight while maintaining the human-machine interface. Now that you have the real need identified, you're in a good position to be successful with a solution. So those are two techniques that I teach in this graduate diploma in design. The diploma consists of 3 courses. The first course is offered in the fall term in September, and it is the design methods course where I take them through these types of methods, including synthesis. And then they undertake 2 design projects, one after another, 4 months long, usually with industry partners. Recently, because we are a co-op school, we made this graduate diploma in design a co-op program. So now the students can choose to take a co-op version of this. So they would, for example, take the ME680 course and then they could take the project course, and then they could go into industry and work for 4 months, and then they'd come back and undertake a project that they found in industry during their practice to work on as the second project. And this has proven to be a very nice bridge to professional practice. Many of the students that are in the course, I had about 50 students this year. I would say 25 of them are international students. In fact, one from Brazil is in the program right now. They're finding it very challenging because the projects are real projects. But on the other hand, they'll be prepared with 2 or 3 design projects in their portfolio before they apply for a job. The theory of reflective practice that Donald Schoen talks about in his book is used during these studio sessions. By that I mean framing the problem appropriately and interactively, using these methods to develop a very deep problem understanding. Learning to have this kind of reflective conversation with the problem, so personifying the problem and understanding and listening to what it's telling you. Generating design moves with the problem and try to shape the problem into a situation that's less messy. And just generally getting the students to accept the uncertainty and the difficulty and the complexity around these ill-defined problems, and giving them the confidence to approach these messy situations. And this is done with myself in a studio kind of session. Here are some of the companies that have engaged with us over the last few years. All of them have projects. I have more projects than I have students. I have a good source of company contacts in this area, and they're very willing to engage with us. So I want to end with a quote. A scientist discovers that which exists, and an engineer creates that which never was. Thank you very much for your time. I've enjoyed speaking with you today.
Thank you, Oscar. It's really useful presentation and also fantastic point of view. It's improve us about the perspective of knowledge. I really like the practices that you presented. So I have some questions about chat for people about some question. Mas eu tenho uma, eu gostaria de voltar lá na tua apresentação, your slide. Could you back to your slide, science, design, entrepreneurship, and then innovations, 15, I guess. Slide 15 page. We have some diagram or oh, before that, yeah, that one. You said, oops. Could you go forward again? Yeah, that's one. You said that we have design in the middle of entrepreneurship and science, but you show some dashed rectangle that you can go forward to the entrepreneurship, but you don't show us that we can also go a little bit in science doing design research. Is it means it's not possible, or you just see design in the middle between the two kind of things, the science and entrepreneurship.
Yes, what I was trying to communicate here was that the graduate diploma in design is not a research degree, and so the students would learn about design and possibly a little bit of entrepreneurship. But certainly it's really important for us to study the science of design.
Yeah. All kind of activities, you can have some kind of design perspective, I guess. That's true in your opinion? Is that...
Repeat the question.
You see that you can practice design in, as you said before, needs analysis. We can have some kind of this in science perspective analysis, or using design practices. After this, you can have some practice in the practical field, and also going forward to the business perspective. Is it make sense to you?
I think definitely the process of scientific inquiry can be used during the need analysis process. The process of investigation, yes.
Great. Let's check if someone else have questions for you. Let me chat here. Another one question in. Let me check the. You said about the women problem analysis. It's the most important point. But in many cases, you have some kind of perspective analysis about feasible. I mean, sometimes we want to have perfect solutions, but it's not possible because it's not feasible. How to get balance about this? I mean, to have some solution proposal, but also getting balanced by feasible things.
I think that's a big challenge because in academia we have lots of time to think about things, but in practice you never have enough time, and so you try to do the best you can with the resources that you have. I don't know if that answers the question. The first time we designed a system for Lois, it was only partially successful. It was just a very tough problem to solve. So it wasn't feasible in the end, what we thought about. And that's just a risk that you take in doing design of tough problems.
Yeah, for sure. And another point of view is in your slide 25, page 25, you link 5 points, 5 items, and just then do a red box in the 3 first. Let's check. The first one is creation of artifacts.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And my question is, these artifacts is gathering by design research, because it's in the very beginning of the process. I mean, have artifacts before I understand the problem? It means gathering from design research?
No, this is just a list of the different research perspectives that this paper found that research was talking about. So the research was talking about creating artifacts. It's not in any order. It's just
okay.
the themes. Yeah.
And I have just one more curiosity is about your student from Brazil. Is it possible you share the contact, because you have courses just for graduation level, or have any other like executive program, or just summer course or something like that, or just in the graduation program?
No, that's a good question. I was thinking of giving a separate course for working professionals because this program is really designed more for engineers who leave their work and come, and a lot of working professionals could benefit just from the one course that I teach. And so I was actually thinking about offering just that course sometime to working professionals, and just in a sort of a week-long kind of course too. The best way that could work, for example, if it was in a company, would be for me to meet with the people first and get them to identify some tough problems that they have within the company. And then we would write a little case study around one or two of those problems. And then I would come back and we would apply the methods to that specific problem that they have in order to try and solve it.
Yeah. We have in our program, let me check the slide here. You said that you have co-op the slide 15.7.
Slide 10.
What's mean co-op? It's a practical application, or is a kind of in your program you have some models about called co-op.
Co-op, yeah. The co-op for the graduate diploma in design, the students are actually hired by a company and they work there for 4 months, and I don't have much interaction with them at all. They are actually making money during this time. So in this time here in co-op, they're actually making money. They're working as an employee.
Okay. And another just last question is in your slide 55, you have some kind of breakdown structure. I love it, because you said that many people, engineers, just focus on the right side down part of subsystem.
Yeah.
And but it's a kind of breakdown structure for problem solving, right? It's a problem analysis.
Yeah,
exactly. And then why people don't see the big problem and then just see the small portion of the problem? Because that is can see that in the field, and that's why you have just 31%, 8% focus on this poor analysis of problem, You can explain a little bit more why people don't see the needs, the real needs?
Yeah. So 31% identify a need. And this is very characteristic of novices. They want to jump to a solution. So they forget about formulating the problem. They just jump to a solution right away. And Nigel Cross, who is a researcher in Open University, has written about expertise and compared how experts and novices tackle design problems. And what he's saying is that novices just jump in right away and try and solve the problem, whereas experts do the opposite. They step back and they try to understand the problem first before they solve it.
Yeah, for sure that is a big mistake, and then we need to training more about this situation for getting better results. Okay, Oscar, thank you for your presentation. It's really useful. I'd like to say thank you again, and for all attendees for this presentation session. We have planning to get one more session in the future. Ola, you know Ola, Professor Ola, and then probably will share some experience to us also too. And then I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for your presentation.
So much. Yes, it was my pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you are welcome. Thank you. See you around. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye to all. Thank you, guys.